Trying to save money can sometimes lead to some really interesting choices. And by interesting, I really just mean weird. But sometimes the weird stuff actually works. And if you're willing to get a little creative or even be seen as a little odd, you might be able to stretch your budget further than you ever thought possible. Today, I'm going to share 10 or so somewhat weird money-saving habits that people actually do, plus how you might be able to make those habits work for you. I'm Joy of Frugal Creative Living, and trust me, this list is either going to make you raise an eyebrow or it might inspire you to try something new. So let's go. First is cooking food in the dishwasher. Now, believe it or not, there are some people who cook fish, vegetables, even eggs in their dishwasher while running their dishes through a wash cycle. And the idea behind it is that they're killing two birds with one stone. They're cleaning the dishes while cooking their food without using any extra energy with the stove or the oven. And I watched a couple of videos and read where people just wrap the food up real tight in foil or in jars and then situate the food between the dishes on the racks. And then it cooks the food with the heat and the steam of the wash cycle, I guess, and sometimes the drying cycle. From what I've seen, it probably takes a lot of trial and error at first, and some of the food is not going to cook evenly. And if the food isn't wrapped well, some of that soap can get in there. However, there are people who have perfected the process, and for some foods, it seems to work really well. And obviously, it helps to save money on electricity and gas. So I'm not going to knock it. I'm also not going to try it, but to each their own. Next is using reusable cloths instead of toilet paper. And I know somebody out there is going to say ew in the comments. I have not tried it, but honestly, I'm not really opposed to the idea. And the closest that I've ever come to it is using cloth diapers for my daughter when she was a baby. It saved me a ton of money instead of buying disposable diapers. And it wasn't really as nasty of a process as one might think. Honestly, I'm strongly considering testing it out because you can't really know how it is until you try it. Sometimes. If you've ever thought about trying this, you can search on Amazon to find a good set of reusable toilet paper cloths. And I did a little searching around and found this set of 60. It has good reviews and a relatively low price tag. But you can also just make your own using absorbent fabric like old t-shirts or microfiber cloths that you might already have at home. And then you just make sure that you have a dedicated covered bin for storing the used cloths and then wash them in hot water to sanitize them. Now these next two, I don't think are really that bad, but I mentioned them in some of my other videos and some people had some issues with these two. And I'm not even talking about the peeing in the shower idea from my 60 frugal living tips video, which got all kinds of objections. But something as basic as adding water to your soap bottles. Now, this can definitely help stretch that bottle for about 2 to 3 times as long as the regular bottle of soap. But people commented that, okay, most soaps aren't concentrated enough and you're removing the effectiveness of the soap because you're diluting it with the water. But I have a tip for that. You can buy foaming soap dispensers or just a cheap bottle of foaming soap from the Dollar Tree like this one. Then when it's empty, fill the bottle about 1/3 with regular liquid soap and then fill the rest of the bottle with water. Shake it up and pump. The reality is that we always add water to liquid soap in order to get it to foam and lather. But in this case, you're adding the water ahead of time. And since it comes out foamy already, you don't have to add any additional water. So really, it's just as effective as usual. And the difference is that by using only a small amount of the soap and then adding water, you're tripling the number of uses that you get from a single bottle of soap. It's like getting 3 bottles for the price of 1. Next is reusing paper towels. Now, if I decide to buy something disposable, I believe in trying to use it multiple times before I throw it away. Now, some people think that it's unsanitary to reuse paper towels, but it can't be any more unsanitary than using the same cloth towel multiple times before you wash it. As a matter of fact, that's why my husband doesn't really like the idea of us using cloth towels for our hand drying. So my compromise is paper towels. But when drying my clean hands, I just let the towel dry on a bar and then I use it the next time I wash my hands. I probably only use it about twice though. Next is reusing tea bags. I mean, why throw away that tea bag after 1 cup if you can get a second use out of it? If you're a big tea drinker, or maybe you like those specialty teas that cost a little bit more than the usual black tea bags, then this, along with some other cost-cutting measures, might make a small difference in your grocery budget. Because it's like getting 2 boxes of tea for the price of 1. I personally like a really strong cup of tea, so I leave my tea bag in the cup the whole time I'm drinking, which means that there's really no flavor left for a second cup. But for those people that don't mind weaker tea, if you only steep your tea bag for about a minute or so, you can just store your used tea bag in the refrigerator in an airtight container or in a Ziploc bag so that it doesn't grow bacteria. But if you forget and leave that tea bag on the counter and it dries out, the recommendation is to throw it away because it's probably already grown some bacteria and it's no more good after that. Collecting water from your dehumidifier to use around the house. So a dehumidifier is designed to remove moisture from the air when it's too humid inside of your house. And since it's removing moisture from the air, it has to collect the moisture within the machine. And then that water has to be emptied out every few days or so, depending on how much water the machine can hold. So some people, instead of pouring the water out from their dehumidifier, will just use the water to do other things around the house, like mopping the floors or washing the car, because apparently on average, a dehumidifier collects about 5 gallons of water per day, which would be great for flushing your toilet because you only need about 1 to 2 gallons of water for each flush. However, it is not safe to drink, and it should not be used on edible plants like vegetables and herbs because there could be bacteria in it. Outside of that, it sounds like it could really be a great way to save some money. Next is turning off your refrigerator. Now, this one might only be extreme if you're turning it off every single day while you're at work or every night while you sleep. The fridge can only really maintain the temperature for up to 4 hours. And beyond that, it becomes a risk to your health because the food is going to spoil. Now, if you're turning it off when you know you're going to be away for a long period of time, like a week or more, then that could be effective in saving you some money on electricity. So if you have an upcoming trip and you want to try this, just make sure that you use up or donate any perishable items before you turn off the fridge, and then clean it out thoroughly so that there's no odors left. And then maybe if you have a backup freezer, you can just store some foods like your bread or butter in there. This next one is sleeping without heat. So some people will go without heat at night to save on energy costs. And I can kind of get with this one, but it depends on how cold it gets in your area. There are some parts of the country where the temperature rarely drops below 50 degrees, even in the winter. But the average lows in my area in the winter are about 30 degrees. So I guess if you decide to turn off the heat overnight and then just layer up with lots of warm blankets and really thick socks, and you wear a coat and a hat and scarf and gloves to bed, you probably be okay. Now, on the flip side, you could also be risking having your pipes freeze if the temperature drops too low in your house. And then you would have created even more of a financial problem than if you had just left the heat on in the first place. Plus, being too cold overnight doesn't really make for the best sleep. The going recommendation is to keep the temperature at about 55 degrees or above, and that should be sufficient in helping you to lower your energy bills through the winter. Buying a whole cow to save money on meat. Some time ago, I read where some people, along with their neighbors, purchased a whole cow. And they had it butchered and all the parts were vacuum sealed. And I had never heard of such a thing. So I looked into it and I found that it's called beef sharing. And it seems to work out where it would cost only around $5 to $6 per pound for all the parts, which is pretty good. And it includes the cutting and the wrapping. I mean, that's really a good price. Now, you can purchase the whole cow yourself and have it butchered and packaged. But you need to know that the average cow yields about 500 pounds of beef after it's trimmed and deboned. And the question is, can you eat all of that meat within 1 year, which is the longest recommended time that you should store meat in the freezer? You don't want to end up throwing meat out in the end, trying to get a good deal on it in the beginning. But again, if you know your family eats a lot of meat, or you know somebody that can go in halvesies with you, it could really be a reasonable way to save some money on meat. Next is dumpster diving. And yes, there are people who do this. Maybe you're one of those people. And yes, to me, it sounds gross and disgusting. I literally went on WikiHow and typed in how to dumpster dive just to see if there was a way to do it that wasn't gross and disgusting, and I couldn't find one. Sorry. However, there are some tips that I have found if you are interested, because I know people find good stuff in some dumpsters. I know they do. So number one is to check out large retail or grocery stores that often throw out perfectly good items due to just minor packaging damage. Number two, if there are fences, locks, or no trespassing signs on the premises where the dumpsters are, you would do well to dive somewhere else. Number three, plan your dives around your city's trash pickup schedule so that you can get the good stuff before the dumpster is emptied. And number four, be respectful and leave the area as you found it. And to all of you that do shop in dumpsters, I say more power to you. Reusing pasta water to water your plants. Now, this one was very interesting to me. I have heard of people using rice water to grow their hair. So the idea of using pasta water to grow your plants just doesn't seem that far-fetched to me. So I also looked that up, and it turns out that the starch in the water helps to retain the moisture of the soil for longer periods of time, and the nutrients in the water can give the soil a little boost, particularly for tomatoes and houseplants. So instead of just pouring all that good water down the drain, you're putting it to good use. But if you decide to try this, make sure that no salt has been added to the water during cooking, and make sure that you let the water cool down before watering your plants. Also, be mindful not to use pasta water for plants that prefer drier soil like succulents or cactus plants. Instead, just stick to using it for leafy greens, herbs, or plants that thrive in good wet soil. Cutting your own hair. Now, this one is not so weird, but when I mentioned it in one of my other videos, I had some people say that whenever people cut their own hair, it always ends up a wreck. And that's not always true. Sometimes I'm sure it is. The fact is that washing and styling your own hair is one thing, but cutting your own hair can be scary, especially if you have really short arms. But it is a big money saver. I've been doing my own hair exclusively for the last 7 years, and it took me almost a year in to attempt to actually give myself a trim, because once you cut it, it's gone for a while. And if you do a bad job, you pretty much just have to live with it until it grows back. But when my split ends started getting out of control, I had to get brave and I had to learn how to do it. And if you want to start cutting your own hair to save money, a couple of tips I have are to invest in a good pair of cutting scissors. Do not use your kids' craft scissors or your sewing scissors, no matter how sharp you know they are. Try maybe just cutting or trimming your bangs. Or just your split ends before you try cutting full styles. And there are so many online tutorials for all lengths and types of hair. And ultimately, you have to remember, it's just hair. It's going to grow back. Now, this next one, for some people, is pretty much a given. And for others, it's just doing too much. But that's cutting open tubes and containers to get every last drop of toothpaste or lotion that you can. And personally, I don't cut open my tubes of toothpaste. When I want to squeeze out the last little bead of tooth soap, I just use one of these little squeezy things to get the job done. But I will absolutely karate chop a bottle in half to get the last of my expensive facial lotion. And by expensive, I just mean $10, which is enough. I want all the lotion. Yes, I do. I have cut the whole top half off and used facial sponges or small spatulas, Q-tips to get the remains out of that bottle. And then I just store that cut open container in a Ziploc bag or an airtight bowl with a lid so that the contents don't dry out. If you try this, you will be surprised how much is still in there. So I say, get your money's worth. That is it for this list. Let me know in the comments if any of these habits are things that you already do, or if maybe you want to try one of the ones that you never really considered before. Whether you try one or all of them, just remember that saving and stretching your money often means thinking outside of the box, sometimes way outside the box. If you found this helpful or just entertaining, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe for more frugal living tips, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.